My cursor moved by itself during a screen share, opened my private messages, and read them out loud to 11 coworkers in a voice that was almost mine. When our IT guy traced the second connection, it wasn't coming from the coffee shop down the street or some server overseas. It was coming from inside my own apartment, from a device that had never once touched my network. I should back up. None of this happened out of nowhere. Looking back now, I think it had been building for a month before it ever showed itself on that call, and I ignored every single sign because ignoring things is easier than being the person who says, "My computer is haunted," out loud to another adult. I'd been fully remote for 2 years by then, working support tickets for a software company that made inventory software for auto parts stores. Nothing glamorous. My days were screen shares, stand-ups, and a Slack channel that never stopped buzzing. I lived alone in a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor, no roommate, no pets, deadbolt and a chain lock because the building had a history of package theft. The small stuff started about 3 weeks before the call. My cursor would drift half an inch while I was typing, like my hand had twitched, except my hand hadn't moved. I'd catch it out of the corner of my eye and blame the mouse, a cheap one I'd bought off a clearance rack. Then autocomplete started finishing sentences I hadn't started. I typed the ticket is, and it would fill in resolved, "Please close," before I decided that's what I wanted to say. I told myself it was predictive text getting better at its job. Then files started moving. Not deleted, just relocated. A folder called taxes that I kept on my desktop showed up nested inside a folder called old screenshots one morning, and I hadn't touched either of them in weeks. I ran a virus scan. Clean. I ran it twice. Still clean. I chalked it up to some sync glitch with the cloud backup software IT made us install, the one that indexed everything on our laptops for compliance, and I moved on, because that's what you do when the alternative is too big to hold. The night before the call, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing a small clicking sound from the living room, the kind a laptop makes when the fan kicks on, except my laptop was closed on the kitchen table and my phone was on silent on the nightstand. I got up, walked through the apartment, checked the deadbolt, checked the chain, checked the window locks. Everything sealed. I told myself it was the radiator ticking as it cooled. Old buildings make noise. I went back to bed and didn't sleep much anyway. The next morning was a normal Tuesday stand-up, 9:45, the usual 11 faces in a grid. I was sharing my screen to walk through a ticket queue, dragging items between columns, narrating like I'd done 1,000 times before. About 4 minutes in, my cursor stopped answering to my hand. It didn't jump or glitch. It moved the way a person moves a mouse when they know exactly where they're going. It clicked out of the ticket board. It opened my file explorer. It navigated, folder by folder, to a subfolder buried 3 levels deep that I used for nothing but personal notes, stuff that had no business being on a work laptop. And I want to be honest that I know that was a mistake, keeping it there, but everyone does it. It opened a text file. Private messages I'd copied out of a chat with someone I used to date, stuff I'd saved because I didn't know how else to hold onto it. And then, through the meeting's audio, and a voice built out of some approximation of mine, flat and a half-step wrong in the vowels, it started reading them out loud. I heard my own coworkers go silent on the call. Someone typed, "Is this a bit?" into the chat. Someone else left the meeting. I was grabbing at my mouse, clicking anywhere, hitting escape, and none of it responded, because the cursor wasn't taking instructions from me anymore. It kept reading. Every sentence landed in that dead, wrong cadence version of my own voice, and the whole time my hands were shaking too hard to do anything but slam the laptop shut. I called our IT lead, a guy named Desh who'd fixed my VPN problems a dozen times without ever making me feel stupid about it, and he had me boot back up under his watch, remote into my machine himself, and start pulling logs. It took him about 20 minutes to find what he was looking for, and when he found it, he went quiet in a way I hadn't heard from him before. There were 2 active sessions on my laptop during the meeting. Mine, and a second one, authenticated with my own credentials, connecting through a piece of remote access software that our IT department did install fleet-wide, the same one that let Desh get in right now to help me. The second session had connection logs. He traced the IP. It resolved to my home router. Not a spoofed address, not a proxy bouncing through my own network to hide somewhere else. The actual originating hardware was on my own local network, sitting behind my own modem, in my own apartment. He asked me to check every device connected to my Wi-Fi. I had 4, my laptop, my phone, a smart plug for a lamp, and a printer I hadn't turned on in a month. The second session's device fingerprint matched none of them. It had a name, a string of letters and numbers with no manufacturer he recognized, and a MAC address that had apparently connected for the first time roughly 6 minutes before the stand-up started, then dropped off the network the second Desh started pulling logs, like it knew it was being watched. I asked him what that meant. He said it meant somebody had a device physically present inside my apartment, connected to my Wi-Fi, using my own login to control my laptop in real time. He said it like a technical fact, careful, professional, the way you describe a router misconfiguration, because I don't think he wanted to be the one to say the other version of it out loud. I left work early. I called the police, more out of a need to have said it to someone with a badge than any real hope they'd find something. 2 officers walked my apartment with me. Every window was locked from the inside. The chain was still latched, which meant whoever left, if anyone had ever been there, hadn't gone out the front door while I was gone, or hadn't needed to. They found nothing unplugged, nothing hidden, no vents big enough for a person, no sign of forced entry anywhere. One of them said, not unkindly, that sometimes smart devices get compromised and start acting like ghosts on a network, that it was probably the printer or some firmware exploit. And I let him believe I believed that, because it was easier than asking what he'd say about a MAC address that had a physical location and a first seen timestamp and no matching object in the room. I changed my Wi-Fi password. I changed every account password I had. I bought a physical webcam cover, unplugged the smart plug and threw it in a drawer, and asked to switch teams so I wouldn't have to see those 11 faces again, the ones who'd heard my voice, or something built to sound like it, reading my own private words back at me. The network logs still show it, if you know how to pull them. One connection, roughly 6 minutes long, originating from inside my own 4 walls, from a device that has never shown up again, before or since. Desh ran a scan of the whole building's Wi-Fi range a few days later, just out of his own curiosity, he said. He found it again for about 4 seconds, then it was gone. He asked if I wanted him to keep looking. I told him no. I think some part of me already knew that whatever it wasn't looking for a network. It was looking for me, and for one 4-minute window, it had found exactly what it wanted. Some nights I still hear the clicking sound from the living room. I don't get up to check anymore. I just lie there, and I listen, and I wait to see if it moves toward the bedroom door, and so far, every single time, it hasn't. So far. I did go back through the recording of that stand-up once, months later, after I'd moved to a new apartment across town and told myself the distance would settle something in my chest that hadn't settled yet. Our meetings got auto-transcribed by default, some compliance feature nobody opted out of, and the transcript still sat in a shared drive nobody had bothered to purge. I read it instead of watching it, because I couldn't make myself hear that voice again. Everything matched what I remembered, word for word, except for one line near the end that I never heard live, that must have happened in the half-second after I slammed the laptop shut and before the call dropped entirely. The transcript has it tagged under my name, spoken through my microphone, for words, nothing else after it.
It says, "Tell them I'm still here."
I don't know who them was supposed to be. I've never told anyone that part.
I'm only saying it now because I finally noticed the smart plug I threw in a drawer 2 apartments ago showed up, powered on, in the corner of a video call last week, in a room I don't live in anymore, sitting on a shelf I don't own.
A coworker of mine died 3 weeks before this happened, and she still joined our 9 a.m. stand-up every single morning, a black tile with a green recording dot glowing under her name. Nobody added her back to the call.
And the morning I finally said her name out loud instead of pretending her tile wasn't there, that black square unmuted itself, and it answered me.
Her name was Priya. She worked on the same claims processing team I did, fully remote, spread across 4 time zones. The kind of job where you know someone's voice and their coffee mug in the corner of their bookshelf better than you know their face in person, because you've never once met in person. We'd worked together for 2 years. She was sharp, funny in a dry way that took people a beat to catch, and she always joined stand-up 2 minutes early, camera on, already half laughing at something before the meeting officially started. She died on a Thursday. An aneurysm, we were told, sudden, at home, alone. Her husband found her that evening. The company sent an email Friday morning, the kind with careful, bloodless language, with heavy hearts, "If you need support, our EAP line is available." And then Monday's stand-up happened like nothing had changed except one fewer face in the grid. For the first week, nobody mentioned her. That was its own kind of strange, the way a name can turn into something people route around in conversation, like a pothole everyone swerves for without discussing it. I noticed her account still showed up grayed out in our team directory. I noticed HR hadn't deactivated her calendar yet, so meeting invites she'd accepted while she was alive kept auto-populating her availability as busy, weeks out, a kind of ghost schedule nobody had the stomach to clear. The black tile showed up on the Monday of the second week. I remember because I was the one who saw it join first. 9 a.m., the little chime the app makes when someone enters, and there was her name, sitting in the grid same as always, except the video square was solid black, no face, no error message, nothing. Under the name, the small red then green recording indicator that our compliance settings put on external guests and new devices. It just sat there. Somebody asked if her account had been hacked. Our manager, a normally unflappable guy named Desmond, said he'd flag it to IT and we should just start the meeting. IT's answer, when it came a day later, was that her account had already been fully deactivated on the back end the same week she died, per company policy, all access revoked, single sign-on disabled, remote wipe pushed to her work laptop. There was, according to them, no way for that account to authenticate into a call. And yet it kept joining. Every morning, 9 a.m., same tile position, same black square, same green, like clockwork, like it had never once missed a meeting in its life. People adapted the way people always adapt to a thing they don't want to look directly at. Someone renamed their own display so the black tile would get pushed to the second page of the grid where you had to scroll to see it. Someone else started dialing in a few minutes late so they'd miss the join chime. Desmond quietly asked everyone, over a private message, not to mention Priya by name during the call, for morale, he said, though nobody really believed that was the whole reason. I went along with it. I didn't want to be the person who made it weirder than it already was. But I noticed things, the way you notice things you're actively trying not to notice. The recording dot never blinked off, not once, not during breaks, not on days the rest of us didn't even use the recording feature. Once, when someone's cat jumped onto their desk and everyone laughed, I could have sworn the black tile's audio bar, that little sound level indicator that flickers when a live mic picks up ambient noise, twitched upward for half a second, like something on the other end had reacted too. Another time, a new hire, someone who'd never met Priya and didn't know the unspoken rule, asked cheerfully, "Hey, who's the black square? Is their camera broken?" There was a silence on the call that went on a beat too long. Then Desmond changed the subject so fast it was almost violent. The new hire looked around, confused, and never asked again. I found out later someone pulled her aside after the meeting and quietly explained. It went on like that for almost 3 weeks. I started dreading 9 a.m. the way you dread a dentist appointment, some low dull hum of anxiety that built through the morning and only resolved once the meeting ended and I could close the window. I told myself I was being irrational. Grief does strange things to a team, I thought, and maybe the account glitch was just some IT ticket languishing in a queue, low priority, nobody's actual job to fix. And eventually somebody would kill the process and the tile would vanish and that would be that. Then came the Monday it wasn't. I don't fully know what made me do it. I'd had a bad weekend, missing her more than I expected to, replaying some inside joke we used to have about a client who mispronounced our product name every single call. I came into stand-up raw in a way I hadn't let myself be at work before. Desmond was running through updates. My turn came around. And instead of giving my status like normal, I looked at that black square sitting in the second row and I said her name.
Priya, I miss your terrible jokes.
I said it like a throwaway line, half a joke to cover the fact that my voice had cracked a little on her name. The call went quiet the way it always did when someone broke the rule. I expected Desmond to redirect us again. He didn't. He was staring at his own screen, and when I looked back at mine, I understood why.
The recording done on the black tile had turned solid, no flicker, no pulse, just a steady, saturated green like it had locked onto something. And then the mute icon, the little crossed-out microphone that had sat over her name for 3 straight weeks without moving, disappeared.
The tile was still black. No face, no video, nothing to look at.
But the audio bar beneath her name started moving, small jumps at first, like someone breathing close to a microphone, and then it said my name back. It used my name the exact way she used to say it, same stress on the second syllable, same warmth underneath it that always made you feel like you were the specific reason her morning was better. And then it said, I never left, I just don't like the new call settings.
A small laugh followed, her laugh, the one that always came a half beat after the joke instead of during it. Nobody on that call said a single word for what felt like a full minute. Someone's connection icon showed them typing and then not sending anything. I remember Desmond's hand moving toward his keyboard like he was going to end the meeting for everyone, and then stopping. I asked, because some part of me needed to, whether it was really her. The black tile didn't answer that question directly.
It said, tell everyone I'm still recording, and then the audio bar went flat and the mute icon reappeared over her name, and the tile sat there silent and black for the rest of the meeting like nothing had happened at all.
IT pulled the account logs again after that call, and they told us, flatly, that there was no live participant object associated with that tile, no audio stream on their end. Nothing in the server logs to indicate an active connection had ever unmuted. As far as their systems were concerned, nobody had spoken. They suggested it might have been someone playing a prank, spoofing an audio feed, and closed the ticket. The tile still joins every morning. The recording is still green, steady now instead of pulsing, and nobody has said her name out loud in a meeting since. I think about it every single day at 8:59, watching the lobby fill up, watching for that black square to slide into the grid the way it always does, right on time, the way she always used to be. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to say her name again. Last week Desmond quit, no notice period, no exit interview, just a 2-line email to the team and a calendar full of canceled meetings. Someone said he'd started sleeping with his laptop unplugged at night. I didn't ask why.
Some questions you learn not to say out loud, the same way you learn not to say certain names into a live microphone, because you're never fully sure anymore what's actually listening on the other end, or how badly it wants to be included.
I found a video recording on our shared drive dated 5 months in the future, filmed in my own empty office, and every single person on that call was me, at different ages. The oldest one leaned toward the camera, close enough that I could see the lines around his eyes, and mouthed a warning about a meeting that hasn't happened yet. I need to explain how I ended up looking at it in the first place. I worked as an operations coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company, hybrid in name only, since almost nobody actually came into the physical office anymore except me, once a week, mostly out of habit and the fact that my apartment's internet was unreliable on Mondays. The office itself had one meeting room left in use, glass walls, a single conference camera mounted above the TV that stayed powered on around the clock because nobody had ever bothered to schedule it into standby. Everyone else dialed in from home. I was, most weeks, the only human body in that building. Part of my job, the unglamorous part nobody fights you for, was digital housekeeping. Our shared drive had accumulated years of recorded calls, onboarding videos, town halls, all of it dumped into folders with names like Q3 Miscellaneous and Do Not Delete, Ask Denise, and my manager finally greenlit a cleanup pass before our storage costs tipped into a new billing tier. I spent 2 weeks going folder by folder, flagging anything past a retention cutoff, and it was tedious in the specific way that makes your brain wander, which is probably why I didn't think twice at first when I saw a file that didn't fit. It was sitting in a folder for recordings automatically generated by the meeting room camera, the one in our one remaining conference room, the kind of folder that usually filled up with dull 30-minute planning syncs. This file was named with a date. I didn't clock it the first time I scrolled past it. I only noticed on my second pass, when I went to sort everything by date to check retention windows, and the sort put this one file dead last, after everything else in the entire drive, months past the current date, months past anything that had happened yet. I assumed it was a placeholder, some corrupted metadata from a scheduling glitch, a calendar entry that had bled its timestamp into the wrong field. I opened it mostly to confirm that, expecting a broken file or a blank screen. It opened fine. It was 31 minutes long.
And it was, unmistakably, our conference room, the one downstairs, the one I sat in every single Monday, empty of furniture in a way it had never been in real life, just bare walls and the TV mounted above an empty stretch of floor where the table should have been.
On the screen, in a normal call grid layout, were 5 video tiles. Every one of them was labeled with my name.
Every one of them showed my face, except each face was a different age.
One looked barely into his 20s, a haircut I recognized from photos my mother still had on her wall. One looked close to how I actually look now. Two were older, gray creeping in at the temples on one, fully silver on the other, deep lines carved into a face I didn't recognize as mine yet, but somehow knew I would eventually earn. I want to say I closed the laptop immediately. I didn't. I sat there and watched, the way you keep touching a bruise to see if it still hurts the same amount. For the first several minutes, nothing happened that I'd call an event. The five of me just existed on that screen, silent, occasionally shifting like people do on a call when they're listening to something off camera, nodding at intervals that didn't line up with each other, the way a real meeting looks when everyone's reacting to different audio delays. There was no sound at all. I turned my volume up until it hurt my ears just to confirm the audio track was really empty, and it was, or at least whatever it held was too quiet for my speakers to catch. I told myself, in the calm rational voice I used to talk myself out of things, that this had to be some kind of test recording, a deepfake demo somebody in IT had built and forgotten to delete, or an AI-generated sample from whatever vendor pitch had come through that quarter. I almost closed it right there.
I would have, except the oldest tile, the one with the fully silver hair and the face carved down to something spare and worn, turned toward the camera.
Not toward whoever he was supposedly listening to.
Toward the camera, meaning toward me, meaning toward whoever would eventually be sitting exactly where I was sitting, watching exactly this file. Exactly this many months in the future from when it was supposedly recorded. He leaned in.
The image quality held steady enough that I could see the texture of his skin, a small scar above his eyebrow that I don't have yet, and his mouth started moving with no sound behind it. I paused the video and unpaused it a dozen times, trying to read his lips like you'd sound out a word underwater.
It took me 4 full passes to be confident about what he was saying, and even now I'm not entirely sure I have all of it right, but the core of it was this: don't take the meeting. Not which meeting. Not with who.
Just those 4 words, repeated twice, slow and deliberate, the kind of slow you use when you're trying to get through to someone you're not sure can actually hear you. I closed the laptop that time. I didn't touch that folder again for 3 days. The thing that made it worse, the thing I couldn't shake once I let myself think about it directly, was the date on the file. It landed 2 days after our upcoming quarterly strategy review, a meeting that had just been added to the company calendar that same week, a meeting I'd been specifically asked to attend in person, in that same conference room, because leadership wanted a real room presence for once instead of another wall of video tiles. Nobody had announced that meeting yet when the file's creation timestamp said it was recorded. The invite went out 4 days after I found it. I told the coworker, carefully, without using the word haunted, that I'd found some kind of corrupted test file that looked unsettling and asked if she'd seen anything like it before. She hadn't. She suggested I flag it to IT, and I did, framing it as a storage anomaly, a file with an impossible timestamp. Their answer came back 2 days later. The file's metadata was, as far as their systems could tell, completely valid, generated by the conference room's own recording hardware, and no, they had no explanation for why the system clock would have recorded a future date, and no, they couldn't find any other file like it anywhere in the archive, past or present. They asked if they could take a look themselves. I said yes. I never heard back from them again, and when I checked the ticket a week later, it had been closed with no resolution notes at all. The quarterly review is in 9 days. I still don't know if I'm supposed to be in that fifth tile eventually, the version of me that hasn't happened yet, sitting in a room that will, by then, probably have furniture in it again. I don't know if not attending is the whole warning or only half of it, whether skipping the meeting is exactly what saves me or exactly what the oldest version of me was trying to prevent from happening in some entirely different way. I've reread his mouth shape in my memory so many times that I'm no longer sure if I'm remembering the video or just remembering my own fear of it. I still have the file. I haven't deleted it, even though deleting it was my entire assigned job. I open it some nights, muted, just to check whether the 5 tiles are still arranged the same way, whether the oldest one is still turned toward the camera or has shifted to look at something else in that empty room.
So far it hasn't moved from that pose, still leaned in, still mid-warning, waiting for a version of me that hasn't caught up to it yet.
The invite for the quarterly review is sitting in my calendar right now, accepted, because I accepted it on reflex before I'd found the file, back when it was just another meeting. I haven't decided whether to decline it. I keep telling myself I have 9 more days to figure that out, as if 9 days is a long time, as if the version of me who already lived through whatever happens in that room isn't the one who came back specifically to tell me it isn't.